Welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking Kink 101 for beginners. Here's a warning for intermediate to advanced kinky folk. The fundamentals leave out tons of gray area and detail that experienced kinksters think is the bread and butter of the scene. This is not a how-to on kink. This is an intro. I'll do Kink 201 and 301 and beyond later, because you have to crawl before you walk, before you suspend someone from the ceiling. So, what is kink? When I talk about kink, I'm talking about anything that's considered unconventional in terms of sex. Fetishes are slightly more specific as they refer to a specific sexual fixation, usually towards something that's not typically sexualized. And then there's slap and tickle, which is basically anything that isn't really kinky or unconventional, but that lots of couples think is racy and they use to spice up their sex lives. So if kink is unconventional, what's normal? Frankly, the answer to that question is nothing. Or everything, depending on how you want to look at it. There really is no such thing as normal when it comes to what you want to do with sex. At some point in our development as children, our brains become wired with all sorts of things that eventually help define a great majority of our behavior as adults, including our sexual predilections. Not everyone has kinks or fetishes. Some people are perfectly content with basically routine sexual activity. But more people than we think have something they want to include in the bedroom that's considered unconventional. For some, those things go beyond just a simple interest in irregular sex acts. Some people are wired with definitive fetishes, something they actually require to make sex perfectly satisfying. Not that fetishists can't have conventional sex or do things that don't include their fetishes, but without their inclusion, sex tends to be less than fulfilling for them. Now, since fetishes are generally focused on an object that's not typically sexualized, people who lack any sort of true fetish sometimes think those people with fetishes are weird or in some way fucked up. Largely, though, that's just not true. And for most people, fetishes simply aren't something that can be gotten over. If you have a fetish, you will probably have that fetish for the whole of your life. And for some people, this can be a huge problem because so few seem to really understand their fetishes. And a fetish can be anything from the pretty common foot fetish to a need for a certain scent, from asphyxiation to urine. The medical term for a fetish is a paraphilia. A 2009 list contains a total of 547 paraphilias. But it leads with this statement. Not all these paraphilias have necessarily been seen in a clinical setup. This may not be because they do not exist, but because they are so innocuous, they are never brought to the note of clinicians. Like allergies, sexual arousal may occur from anything under the sun, including the sun. Keep in mind as we go on that a fetish is different from a kink, in that a kink can be summed up as a particular sexual interest, whereas a fetish is almost always a sexualized interest in a typically non-sexual thing, often to the exclusion of conventional sexual interest. But there are a ton of kinks in the world, and there does seem to be some crossover between fetishes and kinks, because honestly, how can most people tell between the sexualization of a non-sexual object and the feeling of arousal at any given non-conventional sex behavior? A lot of people who aren't kinky or don't have fetishes think that those who do are freaks, and often make an immediate mental jump from like some freaky things to pedophile. That's honestly a disingenuous and really unfair way to look at it. So here's a short list of some common kinks. Cross-dressing. Typically, this is straight men who like to wear women's clothing. Almost all cross-dressers are heterosexual. Ladies, if you walk in on your man wearing your panties, it's not because he's gay. It's that he thinks your panties are sexy. Pegging. Some men like to take it up the ass. Not all these men are gay. And while we're on the topic, not all gay men like anal sex. For the straight guys who like to see what it's like to be penetrated, of course, women aren't naturally equipped for that, so they need to incorporate a strap-on or some other toy. Lesbians have been using this technique for ages, and straight couples are in no way prohibited from that activity. Bondage. There are quite a lot of people who just lose their minds when they feel some manner of helplessness in bed. This can be part of a larger power exchange dynamic, which I'll get into in my next video on kink. But even light bondage, like tying her hands to the bedpost with silk scarves can turn an otherwise average night of sex into something mind-blowing. Water sports. This is basically an interest in pee, either being peed on or peeing on someone. Some people find this really off-putting because we're taught that urine is gross. But in actuality, urine is an almost entirely clean byproduct. So logically, there's no real reason for this response. I'm not saying it's wrong to be turned off by it, but there's really no non-emotional reason for that. Spanking. Some people really love the brief stinging pain that comes with a nice, sharp slap on the ass. Most people, especially women, have enough padding that there's no real chance of any damage or even serious pain to a decent spanking. But the slight burst of endorphins that comes with the quick sting of a slap on the ass is a great addition to sex for a lot of people. The third person. There's no real secret that a lot of men have a threesome fantasy, but it's not at all unheard of for women to have that fantasy too. For some, it goes past just fantasy into something that really drives them wild. A spin on that same kink is commonly referred to as cuckolding, which is something that's largely done to men, where the main partner is deliberately excluded from sex with a third party, while still being privy to the act, either by being in the room when it happens, or being subjected to specific knowledge before, during, or after his partner is sleeping with another person. Rape fantasies. I'll bring this one up last, but please don't assume that it's the one that rounds out the whole list. Though most won't admit it, a large number of women have fantasies about being raped, although very, very few seek to fulfill that fantasy in an uncontrolled fashion. It's quite honestly very dangerous. In this day and age, most men are loath to enact that fantasy, mostly because of what they're afraid it says about them if they like it too. Just like the rest of the kinks on this and every other list, this sort of thing needs to be discussed and negotiated, and neither the women who want this, nor the men who enjoy being the aggressor in controlled, negotiated circumstances are bad or fucked up. Rape fantasies are one of the most common fantasies women have, so if it's fucked up, then most of us are fucked up. This does lead us nicely into some general principles of including kinky play in your bedroom. In the kink scene, a common acronym is SSC. It means safe, sane, and consensual. Be safe about what you're doing. Educate yourself on the particulars. Know what you're getting into, and take all precautions necessary. Be sane. Don't include anything that will negatively affect you or your partner emotionally. Don't include anything that will harm you physically, and stay sober while you do it. Mind-altering substances can change the way you perceive how the situation is progressing, and can lead to exceptionally unsafe practices. And make sure everything you do is with consent. Never just spring bondage on someone who hasn't given their informed consent to be tied up, for example. That counts for both, or all, of you. If at any time you don't feel like you're into what's going on in the scene, stop it. One of the best ways to do this is by the use of a safe word. A safe word is something that you agree on as the absolute, no questions asked, 100%, full stop to the scene. Pick a word that you won't ever use during sex. Don't use no, or stop, or don't. Use banana, or lantern, or widescreen. A common safe word in the scene is just the word red, like the stoplight. You can use the stoplight system for yourself. Red for stop, yellow for hang on a second, we need to figure something out, but we don't necessarily have to stop entirely, and, green for go. The proper time for the safe word to be established is during negotiation for the scene. Negotiation is more specific than, hey, wanna fuck? This is sometimes a very non-sexy conversation about the specifics of what is and is not going to be a part of your scene. If you're going to try for some bondage, you need to talk to your partner about what parts of you are going to be tied where, how long you're going to be tied up, what he's not allowed to do to you while you're tied up, and of course, what your safe word will be to call a full stop to the whole scene. For newcomers to kink, the safe word is one of the best keystones for common ground. It's a security blanket that allows the one doing the tying or spanking or whatever to continue without having to stop and check every time his victim squirms and screams, no, stop, don't, when what she wants is exactly not that. But if she says banana, you know she's not playing around. On the flip side, that frees the one being tied up or spanked or whatever to squirm around and yell out, no, don't, without actually worrying that that's going to stop the hot action. Here are a couple other points for basic kinky play. Don't ever leave a tied up person alone. Too many things can happen, from the house burning down to panic attacks, that the person being tied up simply can't escape from. Always have an eye on the person you have held incapacitated. Don't do anything that isn't negotiated. Don't spring pegging on your boyfriend if you haven't cleared the strap on up the ass thing with him first. Follow the rules, whatever the rules are. After negotiation, stick to what's been negotiated. If you've been given permission to spank your girlfriend, don't throw in a backhand to the face. If you feel like you want to include that, ask her afterward if you can do it next time. If you're respectful of the limits set on your kinky play, the chances are much better that there will be a next time. And if you break the rules, there probably won't be. Finding someone who will let you do kinky stuff to them is harder than it should be, so you don't want to blow your chances with one. Learn before doing. Ask, read, practice. There are hundreds of resources available for someone looking to try some kink. I'll link some books and other resources here on my blog. Read them. I promise it'll help you find something you want to try and the best ways to try them. In addition, every major city and most smaller towns have local groups of kinky people that get together to share information, make friends, find partners, and practice safe kinky play. Find those people and get involved. And despite all this extra thinking and reading and practicing you have to do, keep in mind that kink, like all sex, should be enjoyable. Don't be too grave about it. If something doesn't go right in a scene, don't freak out or write it off entirely. Laugh it off and talk about it and learn better for next time. Because sometimes things just don't go right. Toys get lost in places they shouldn't be lost in. Legs go numb. Stiletto heels break. Shit happens. Now this isn't exactly specific to kink, but with the sometimes outrageous things some kinky scenes can include, it becomes a touch more important to handle whatever comes your way with maturity and calm, then be able to rise above it and get back on the bike. Sometimes the best things can come out of the worst situations, so be an adult, and you never know what good might come out of it. A final, slightly more serious note, I've said here that kinks are okay and fetishes are normal, but there are some fetishes that are not okay, and I'm not going to be very PC about this. Most of the weird shit people want to do is perfectly fine, but there are some things that are simply not alright. Part of the consensual bit of safe, sane, and consensual is that the person you're with can consent. That means no children. Pedophilia is a real fetish, and it's unfortunate for those who have it, because they are wired with a real and deep desire to do something that is simply totally, completely wrong. Your kinky play needs to be with consenting adults, period. No children, no animals, no dead people, no one in a coma, things of that nature. Folks under 18, I know you're going to experiment with kinky sex, but understand that it can be exponentially more dangerous than plain old vanilla sex. People over 18, don't include kinky sex with people under 18. Since I've mentioned it, I would like to point out that almost everyone with pedophilia live their entire lives without ever once touching a child or watching child pornography. They know their fetish is wrong, and they spend enormous amounts of energy fighting the urges they're wired with. And it's not just pedophiles. Many fetishists, even those with something as mundane as a foot fetish, spend most of their lives trying to fight the sexual urges that they feel surrounding whatever it is their mind's fixated on. Okay, basically, it all boils down to this. Pretty much everybody's got something that gets them off that they think is a big, dirty secret. Some people don't even know what theirs is. Most of the time, it's something simple that, when included in your sex lives, can make the difference between good sex and fucking phenomenal sex. Talk to your partner about adding something. Take the chance to admit to yourself and to your partner what it is that might get you off better, and if your partner opens up to you, take the chance on trying it. That is, only if you like fucking phenomenal sex, I mean. Good luck, be safe, and have fun.